A sponge diver surfaced from a stormy Greek sea, clutching a lump of corroded metal. That unassuming find, the Antikythera Mechanism, is the world's most astonishing ancient artifact. By the end of this, your understanding of human history and ingenuity will be fundamentally reshaped. This is not just the story of one mysterious object. It is the story of a lost epoch, a time 2,000 years ago when master engineers built intricate machines to calculate the motions of the cosmos. We will follow a century-long detective story, from its chance discovery in a shipwreck to the stunning high-tech revelations that finally cracked its code. How could such advanced technology exist in the ancient world, and why was its genius forgotten for over a millennium? What does its silent existence tell us about the fragile nature of knowledge itself? How much of our past remains hidden, waiting to be found? That lump of metal was first catalogued as simply a piece of corroded clockwork, an oddity among far grander treasures. It was the year 1900, and the world's attention was captivated by the stunning bronze and marble statues being hauled from the deep, not by a fragile, greenish lump of bronze and wood. For months, it sat quietly in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, a forgotten puzzle amidst masterpieces. Then, as the seawater corrosion slowly dried and flaked away, a miracle began to reveal itself. A museum staff member noticed something astonishing poking through the crust, something no one expected to see on an object 2,000 years old: intricate, precisely machined gear teeth. This was not a statue or a vase, this was a machine. The initial assumption that it might be a simple navigational astrolabe, a known medieval instrument, immediately collapsed. Nothing like this complexity had ever been found from the ancient world. The very existence of these gears suggested a technological vocabulary that historians believed was not invented for another 1,000 years. In that moment of recognition, the artifact transformed from a curious shipwreck fragment into one of the most profound archaeological enigmas ever unearthed. It posed a silent, screaming question to modern scholarship. What was this device, and who in antiquity possessed the knowledge to build it? The answers would not come quickly. They would require the patient work of generations, a puzzle to be solved not with shovels, but with X-rays, mathematics, and a radical rethinking of the past. Those first glimpses of gear teeth sparked not instant revelation, but profound confusion. For the better part of 50 years, the Antikythera Mechanism languished in a kind of scholarly purgatory, a puzzle that brilliant minds could see but not solve. The early 20th century researchers who first studied it were working with the tools of their time, their eyes and magnifying glasses, against a crust of corrosion that hid most of its secrets. They knew it was a machine, but what kind? The most logical guesses came from what they already understood about history. Perhaps it was an astrolabe, a known device for measuring star positions. Maybe it was a kind of portable planetarium, a teaching model of the cosmos. Some even suggested it was a sophisticated navigational aid for the very ship that carried it. These were reasonable hypotheses, but they were all wrong because they were built on a fundamental misconception about the ancient world. The established narrative of classical technology was one of grand philosophy, beautiful art, and simple mechanics like pulleys and levers. It was a world of thought, not of intricate clockwork. The idea that a Hellenistic engineer could design a device with dozens of interlocking bronze gears, a mechanism of staggering mathematical precision, simply did not compute. It was an artifact out of time, an impossibility. This created a powerful cognitive dissonance. When evidence contradicts a deeply held story, the human mind often finds it easier to dismiss the evidence than to rewrite the story. So for decades, the mechanism was politely sidelined. It was labeled an anomalous curiosity, a fascinating but ultimately inexplicable outlier. Some even quietly wondered if it could be a hoax, though its provenance from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck was undeniable. This period of misunderstanding is itself a crucial part of the mystery. It stands as a stark testament to how our preconceived notions can create blind spots, how we can look directly at a revolutionary truth and see only a bizarre exception. The mechanism was waiting not for better technology to reveal its secrets, but for a shift in perspective, for someone willing to believe that the history books might be missing an entire chapter. The object's long silence was finally broken not by a historian's intuition, but by a physicist's X-ray. The true revolution in understanding the Antikythera mechanism arrived at the turn of the 21st century, when teams of researchers brought tools of the future to bear on this relic of the past. They employed advanced non-invasive imaging techniques, high-resolution X-ray tomography and polynomial texture mapping, technologies originally pioneered for peering inside the human body and for examining the surface of distant planets. Now, these same digital eyes were turned inward, gazing through 2 millennia of corrosion to see the machine's soul for the very first time. What they revealed was a hidden universe of breathtaking complexity. Inside those calcified lumps, they found a forest of precisely cut gears, some with teeth finer than a millimeter. They discovered components called differential gears, an arrangement so sophisticated it was believed to have been invented for automobiles in the 19th century. Etched onto the front and back surfaces, now visible in stunning detail, were hundreds upon hundreds of tiny Greek text characters, an instruction manual engraved in the metal itself. This technological leap was transformative. The mechanism was no longer just a mysterious artifact. It was now a legible document, a complex treatise on the cosmos written not on fragile papyrus but engineered in enduring bronze. Researchers could suddenly do the impossible. They could virtually disassemble the fragments, see how the gears meshed, and begin the painstaking process of deciphering exactly what this machine was built to calculate. The digital age had given voice to a silent oracle, and what it began to say would rewrite our understanding of ancient genius. The machine was not a simple tool. It was a philosopher's instrument, a working model of the universe as understood by the greatest minds of the Hellenistic age. With a single turn of its input crank, a hidden cosmos of bronze gears whirred to life. On the front, a large dial displayed the ancient Greek zodiac, the band of constellations through which the sun, moon, and planets appear to travel. A delicate pointer representing the sun would advance through these constellations at exactly 1 degree per day, completing a full circuit in 1 solar year. Another pointer representing the moon did something even more clever. It not only traveled through the zodiac, but its speed varied subtly to match the moon's real elliptical orbit, speeding up and slowing down in a beautiful mechanical imitation of celestial physics. This alone was a feat of engineering genius, but it was only the beginning. A second, smaller dial on the front tracked the phases of our moon, a beautiful black and white sphere, likely made of pearl or stone, would rotate within a window, cycling from new moon to full moon and back again, syncing perfectly with the lunar pointer's journey. This transformed the mechanism from a mere calculator into a visual spectacle, a miniature sky one could hold in their hands. But the device's most profound trick was yet to be revealed on its complex backside. Here, 2 large spiral dials, like coiled serpents, held the keys to time itself. One was a sophisticated calendar, tracking the 4-year cycle of the Panhellenic Games, including the original Olympic Games. The other, however, was something truly extraordinary. It was an eclipse prediction calendar. This was the mechanism's pinnacle of computational power. By turning the crank, a user could advance time forward or backward, and a small marker would travel along this spiral, pointing to specific months and years when an eclipse was predicted to occur. But it went even further. Inscriptions next to these markers didn't just say eclipse, they described the eclipse's likely character, using terms from ancient Babylonian astronomy, hinting at its color, direction, and even the wind that might accompany it based on time of day. This was not just science, it was a form of celestial divination, blending precise astronomical calculation with the cultural meaning of these awe-inspiring events. The machine could predict eclipses decades in advance with a reliability that would not be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. It compressed the vast, cyclical patterns of the heavens, the very clockwork of the gods, into a portable box of bronze and wood. To operate it was to hold time itself, to witness the orderly dance of the cosmos made tangible by human ingenuity. This mechanical precision forces a radical shift in perspective. We are not looking at a lucky one-off creation, but at the pinnacle of a forgotten technological tradition. The Antikythera Mechanism's gears are not crude castings. They are masterpieces of microengineering, cut from sheets of bronze with a jeweler's care. Some of these gear wheels are smaller than a modern coin, with triangular teeth so fine and so perfectly spaced that they could only have been produced using specialized cutting tools, likely a kind of primitive lathe or indexing device. The craftsmen who made them had to solve problems of friction, of alignment, of material science, all on a scale that seems almost impossible for the era. But the true marvel is not just in their making, it is in their thinking. Each gear is a physical expression of a mathematical ratio. A gear with 64 teeth meshing with a gear with 38 teeth creates a specific speed reduction. In the mechanism, these ratios are not random. They are the exact numerical translations of known astronomical cycles. For instance, to model the moon's subtle speeding up and slowing down in its elliptical path around Earth, the ancient engineers employed a stroke of pure genius, a gear assembly modern researchers call a differential. This is a system where two input gears, each turning at different speeds, drive a single output gear in a way that calculates the average between them. In the mechanism, one input carried the moon's average motion, the other carried a small, periodic correction. The output was the moon's true, variable motion, displayed perfectly on the front dial. This same mathematical principle is at the heart of every automobile's axle, allowing wheels to turn at different speeds around a corner, but it was not formally described in the West until the 16th century. Finding it inside a 2,000-year-old device is like finding a microchip in a medieval monastery. It tells us something profound. The Antikythera mechanism was not invented from scratch by a solitary genius. Its existence implies a pre-existing school of thought, a developed language of mechanical design. There must have been textbooks of gear diagrams, workshops full of specialized tools, apprentices learning the craft, and patrons funding the research. It points to a lost era of analog computation, a time when the most advanced thinking about the cosmos was expressed not only in equations on papyrus, but in the quiet, turning logic of bronze gears. This was a technology of philosophy, a machine built to make the abstract truths of mathematics visible and tangible. The silence that followed its loss was not just the loss of an object, but the collapse of an entire discipline of knowledge. The bronze gears spoke the language of mathematics, but the etched text spoke directly to its user. Across every surviving surface, in letters often smaller than 2 millimeters high, thousands of Greek characters form a permanent inscription, a user manual and data library fused to the machine itself. This is not the cryptic script of a secret priesthood, but the clear, common coin Greek of the Mediterranean world, the everyday language of educated merchants, sailors, and philosophers. This single detail is profoundly revealing. It suggests the Antikythera mechanism was not a singular treasure locked in a king's vault, but potentially a product of a workshop, an instrument designed for a clientele who could read, operate, and learn from it. It was built for use. The inscriptions serve multiple vital roles. They label the dials, identifying the zodiac signs and the names of the planets. They provide operating instructions, explaining what each pointer shows and how to interpret the complex cycles. Most fascinating are the extensive parapegma texts. A parapegma was a traditional stone calendar pillar with movable pegs, used to mark the annual risings and settings of specific stars and constellations. The mechanism has this entire system engraved upon it. Turning the crank would align a marker with a date, and the text next to it would announce, for example, that the Pleiades star cluster is setting in the evening, signaling the start of the autumn storm season for sailors, or that Arcturus is rising, indicating the time for pruning vines. This transformed the device from a pure astronomical calculator into a practical guide for agriculture, navigation, and the timing of religious festivals. It connected the grand clockwork of the heavens directly to the rhythms of human life on Earth. Furthermore, the eclipse predictions are accompanied by brief descriptors, not just of timing but of character, noting omens based on ancient Babylonian traditions that linked celestial events to weather and fortune. These inscriptions are the crucial bridge. They tether the device's staggering mechanical innovation directly to the written scholarship of its age, referencing known astronomical cycles and practices documented by Greek thinkers. The machine is not an alien artifact. It is a physical culmination of centuries of Mediterranean learning, a library of celestial knowledge rendered not in scrolls but in functional, moving metal. To read its text is to hear the voice of its maker, explaining the cosmos to a curious mind 2,000 years ago. But who built this marvel and when? The machine itself holds the answer, etched in its metal and encoded in its mathematics. Multiple independent clues, like lines on a map, all converge on a single, remarkable moment in history. The style of the Greek lettering carved across its surfaces provides the first major clue. Experts in ancient writing, known as epigraphers, can date text with surprising precision by analyzing the shape and form of the letters. The script on the Antikythera Mechanism possesses distinct characteristics that firmly place it in the late 2nd century before the Common Era. This was not the classical Greek of Plato's time, nor the later script of the Roman Empire, but the specific handwriting of the Hellenistic age. A second, even more precise clock is woven into the machine's very gears. The complex eclipse prediction cycle it calculates is not a generic pattern. It is a specific sequence tied to a known Babylonian astronomical calendar. When researchers ran the mechanism's calculations backward, they found its eclipse predictions aligned perfectly with a calendar that began its count in the year 205 before the Common Era. The machine was built to track time from that specific starting point. Finally, the context of its discovery seals the date. The shipwreck that carried it has been archaeologically dated, based on coins and pottery styles, to between 70 and 60 years before the Common Era. This means the mechanism was already an heirloom, a prized possession being transported when the ship sank. All this evidence points irresistibly to one conclusion. This device was crafted in the decades around 150 years before the Common Era. This places its creation squarely in the heart of the Hellenistic period, a golden age of scientific inquiry that flourished after the conquests of Alexander the Great. It was an era of extraordinary cross-pollination, where Greek geometry met Egyptian engineering and Babylonian astronomy, in great centers of learning like Alexandria in Egypt and Rhodes in the Aegean. In these vibrant hubs funded by wealthy kingdoms, thinkers were not just pondering the cosmos, they were building machines to model it. The Antikythera Mechanism is not an ancient mystery. It is a dated and placeable product of its time, a surviving fragment from the workshop of a genius whose name is lost to us, but whose work now speaks across the millennia. The identity of its creator is perhaps the greatest personal mystery of the Antikythera Mechanism. While no signature graces its bronze plates, the machine itself whispers a name that echoes through the corridors of ancient science: Archimedes of Syracuse. This is not a wild guess, but a conclusion drawn from a convergence of mechanical genius and historical record. We know from multiple ancient sources that Archimedes, beyond his famous Eureka, a moment and war machines, was deeply fascinated by modeling the heavens. Texts describe him constructing intricate orreries, mechanical models that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. The Roman statesman Cicero provides the most tantalizing clue. He writes of a device brought to Rome as war booty by General Marcus Marcellus after the sack of Syracuse in 212 before the Common Era. This device, crafted by Archimedes, was a bronze sphere that beautifully displayed the motions of the celestial bodies, with each turn replicating the unequal journeys of the sun and moon, just as we see in the Antikythera Mechanism. Cicero's description is not of a simple decorative piece, but of a working, predictive instrument. The timeline fits perfectly. Archimedes lived a century before the Antikythera Mechanism was built, but genius of that magnitude creates a legacy. His designs, his principles of gearing and calculation, would have been studied, copied, and refined by subsequent generations of engineers in the great intellectual hubs that followed. The mechanism's sophistication, its use of complex gear trains to solve astronomical problems, aligns perfectly with the school of thought Archimedes pioneered. Furthermore, its likely origin in the cultural sphere of Corinth and its commercial partners like Rhodes places it geographically within the network that would have inherited and traded such advanced knowledge after Syracuse fell. The Antikythera Mechanism, therefore, may not be the handiwork of Archimedes himself, but it stands as the most powerful archaeological evidence of his profound and lasting influence. It is a descendant, a masterpiece built by brilliant followers in workshops on Rhodes or Pergamon, who took the theoretical blueprints of a legendary mind and rendered them in breathtaking, tangible form. In its silent, turning gears, we see the enduring legacy of ancient genius, a physical thread connecting a famous name in the history books to an anonymous, corroded treasure from the seafloor. The Antikythera Mechanism is a stark challenge to our most comforting stories about human progress. We often imagine technology as a steady, upward climb from primitive beginnings to our modern pinnacle, a narrative where the ancient world represents a simpler, foundational step. This device, with its differential gears and eclipse predictions, demolishes that tidy timeline. It presents us with an undeniable truth that advanced technological capability is not a permanent possession of humanity, but a fragile flame that can be ignited, burn brightly, and then be snuffed out for centuries. The precision engineering in this machine would not be matched in complexity in Europe until the great astronomical clocks of the 14th century, over 1,500 years later. This is not a minor gap, it is a chasm of forgotten knowledge. It forces us to replace the image of a straight line of progress with a more honest map, one of scattered peaks and deep valleys. The peak represented by this mechanism was astonishingly high. Its builders possessed not just abstract astronomical theory, but the practical mastery to translate that theory into a physical, working model. They had solved problems of metallurgy, gear design, and miniaturization that would baffle European craftsmen for generations. Then, that peak was lost. The knowledge of how to create such devices, the workshops that built them, the very desire to fund such intricate philosophical instruments, all faded from the cultural memory of the West. This loss reveals a profound and unsettling reality about civilization. Progress is not automatic. It is not guaranteed by the mere passage of time. It depends on a delicate ecosystem of stable patronage, open scholarship, and the transmission of skills from one generation to the next. When that ecosystem fractures, as it did with the political and economic upheavals marking the end of the Hellenistic Age and the rise of the Roman Empire, entire libraries of technical knowledge can vanish almost overnight. The Antikythera Mechanism, therefore, is more than a marvel. It is a monument to a road not taken. It proves that the conceptual leap to complex analog computation, the very idea of building a machine to simulate natural law, was achieved not in the workshops of Leonardo da Vinci or the laboratories of the Enlightenment, but in the bustling port cities of the ancient Mediterranean. This single artifact redefines the ceiling of classical innovation, forcing us to look at every other ancient accomplishment, from concrete to central heating, with new eyes. What other peaks of understanding have we missed, simply because the machines that embodied them turned to dust while the more durable temples and statues endured? The silence of the workshop is as telling as the voice of the machine itself. For a device of such staggering complexity to exist, it could not have been born in a vacuum. Think of the supporting cast required for such a performance. Before a single gear could be cut, there needed to be specialized tools, perhaps a kind of indexing plate or a primitive lathe capable of dividing a bronze circle into 64 perfectly spaced teeth. There needed to be a standardized system of measurement, a consistent module for gear design so that wheels from different batches would mesh smoothly. Most critically, there needed to be a developed mathematical theory of gearing, a set of principles and ratios understood by the engineers, allowing them to translate the slow, majestic cycles of the cosmos into the rapid, precise interactions of tiny bronze wheels. This was not a one-person project, it was the product of an entire ecosystem of knowledge. Where then are the prototypes, the broken test pieces, the apprentice's first clumsy attempt? Where are the bronze tools, the workshop manuals scratched on wax tablets or papyrus, the ledgers ordering shipments of tin and copper? Their utter absence from the archaeological record is a deafening silence. This single, miraculous survivor implies a lost library, not of scrolls but of techniques. It suggests a parallel path of technological development focused on philosophical machinery, a tradition that flourished in the workshops of Rhodes or Alexandria, where masters taught apprentices how to think in gears and ratios. The fact that we have found only one such device, and none of the infrastructure that must have created it, is a sobering lesson in the profound fragility of knowledge. Entire disciplines can vanish. The Library of Alexandria is often mourned for its lost texts, but the true loss may have been more profound: the dissolution of the living communities of craftsmen and thinkers who knew how to turn those texts into functioning reality. The Antikythera Mechanism did not sink alone. It is the sole floating piece of a continent that slipped beneath the waves of history, erased by the relentless upheavals of war, economic collapse, and the simple, quiet shift in what a society values and chooses to preserve. For the individual who commissioned this device, it was far more than a scientific marvel. It was an instrument of power, a lens through which to read the very intentions of the gods. In the ancient Mediterranean worldview, there was no clean division between the science of astronomy and the art of astrology. The stars were not distant balls of gas. They were living forces, divine intelligences whose movements directly influenced the fate of kingdoms and the lives of individuals. A sudden comet was a portent of a ruler's passing. The precise alignment of planets could signal the outbreak of war or the dawn of a prosperous era. An eclipse was not just a shadow crossing the moon. It was a moment of profound celestial significance, often seen as a dire warning that required ritual response. In this context, the Antikythera Mechanism transforms from a calculator into an oracle. Its ability to predict eclipses decades in advance was not about proving a mathematical theory. It was about preparing for a divine event. The inscriptions next to the eclipse markers, describing their likely character and associated omens, turn the machine into a guide for statecraft, A king or advisor could turn the crank, see an eclipse predicted for a certain month years hence, and know that it might be interpreted as a bad omen for a planned military campaign or a shift in royal fortune. They could then perform the proper rituals, make the correct sacrifices, or even delay important decisions to align with more favorable celestial winds. This practical application connected directly to daily life. The parapegma calendar on the device, which announced the seasonal risings and settings of stars, was essential for agriculture. Knowing when the star cluster Pleiades set told a farmer it was time to harvest. Knowing when Arcturus rose signaled the moment to prune the vines. Here, the machine served as a bridge between the grand cosmic clock and the essential rhythms of planting, sailing, and worship. The Hellenistic mind sought order above all else, a rational structure to explain a world that often seemed ruled by capricious deities. The Antikythera Mechanism is the ultimate expression of that drive. It takes the seemingly chaotic, unpredictable dance of the heavens and demonstrates, through the flawless logic of its bronze gears, that it is all part of a vast, comprehensible, and beautiful system. It uses human reason and mechanical genius to map the divine script, offering its user not just knowledge, but a semblance of control. In a single, hand-cranked motion, it merges the quest for scientific understanding with the deep human need to find meaning and guidance in the stars. The Antikythera Mechanism is not an isolated miracle, but the sole surviving artifact from a lost age of mechanical wonders. Ancient texts are filled with descriptions of other astonishing devices that sound more like myth than history. In the 1st century of the Common Era, the engineer Heron of Alexandria described entire automated theaters. These were not simple puppets, but complex scenes powered by systems of weights, strings, and even steam. One account tells of a miniature theater where doors would swing open automatically. Tiny figures would move across a stage performing a play, and then the entire set would reset itself, all without a human hand touching it. These were automata in the truest sense, machines designed to mimic the actions of living beings. Even more common were elaborate water clocks, known as clepsydry, which did far more than just tell time. They incorporated moving figurines that pointed to the hour, ringing bells, and even models of birds that sang when the water level reached a certain point. These were public spectacles of engineering, blending timekeeping with entertainment and artistry. Then there are the legendary, almost lost achievements. The philosopher Cicero wrote with awe about a celestial sphere built by Posidonius, a device so perfect it showed the daily motion of the sun, moon, and 5 planets with each turn, a direct predecessor to the Antikythera Mechanism. For centuries, modern scholars read these accounts with a degree of skepticism, viewing them as exaggerated fables or the wishful thinking of ancient writers. The discovery of the Antikythera Mechanism changes that interpretation entirely. It provides the crucial physical proof that the underlying technology to build such wonders not only existed, but had reached an extraordinary level of sophistication. The precise bronze gearing, the understanding of ratios and periodic motion, the very concept of using machinery to simulate natural processes, all of this was real. Suddenly, Heron's automated theaters shift from fantasy into the realm of the plausible. They were not magic, but the application of the same mechanical principles found in the Antikythera device, just directed toward storytelling and spectacle instead of astronomy. The water clocks with their singing birds become not childish toys, but public demonstrations of a society's mastery over hydraulics and simple automation. This contextual shift is profound. We are no longer looking at a single, inexplicable outlier, but at the only surviving physical evidence of a vibrant and widespread technological movement. The Hellenistic world and the early Roman Empire appear to have cultivated a whole culture of mechanical simulation, where engineers applied their knowledge of gears, levers, and fluids to 2 grand pursuits: replicating the cosmos and replicating life itself. The Antikythera Mechanism was the pinnacle of the first pursuit, a philosopher's machine for modeling the heavens. The automated theaters and hydraulic wonders represented the second, a playful yet profound attempt to breathe motion into inanimate material. Together, they paint a picture of a lost era of analog computation, where the boundary between science, art, and entertainment was beautifully and mechanically blurred. This profound silence after such a symphony of gears is the real heart of the mystery. Why would a civilization capable of building a cosmic calculator simply stop and forget how it was done? The answer is not a single event, but a slow, tragic unraveling of the very conditions that made such genius possible. First, consider a fundamental shift in cultural priorities. The Roman Empire, which absorbed the Hellenistic world, was a civilization of magnificent pragmatists. They were master builders of roads, aqueducts, and monumental architecture, engineering marvels of a different sort. Their genius lay in scale, administration, and concrete, not in the delicate, philosophical clockwork of the Greeks. The Roman mind valued what was useful for conquest, governance, and public spectacle. A complex bronze machine that predicted eclipses and star risings was a fascinating luxury, perhaps a curiosity for a wealthy collector's villa, but it was not essential to running an empire. The institutional drive, the state patronage that likely funded the research and workshops behind devices like the Antikythera Mechanism, gradually dried up. The focus moved from modeling the heavens to mapping the earth. Then there is the brutal economics of material. These devices were not made of stone or clay. They were crafted from valuable bronze, a material that was always in demand for coins, weapons, and statues. In times of conflict or economic hardship, a delicate, incomprehensible mechanism was far more valuable melted down into raw material than preserved as a scientific artifact. How many other masterpieces of gearwork were sacrificed to the crucible, recycled into spearheads or coins that bought a soldier's bread? The knowledge they embodied was literally liquidated. Most critically, this was not a mass-produced technology. It was the secret craft of a tiny, elite group of artist engineers, likely centered in just a few scholarly cities. Their understanding was a fragile chain, passed from master to apprentice in workshops, dependent on stability and patronage. The political and social collapses that marked the end of the ancient world, conflicts, the burning of libraries like the great one at Alexandria, the fragmentation of trade routes severed these chains irrevocably. When a master died without a student, or when a workshop was scattered by conflict, decades of specialized technique vanished in a generation. This was not a failure of intelligence. The people who came after were no less clever. It was a catastrophic failure of transmission. The knowledge of how to build such machines was non-essential for survival in a destabilizing world, and so it retreated, then disappeared from the cultural memory. It became a ghost in the historical record, a rumor in old books that no one could quite believe was true, until a diver's hand brought the ghost back into the light. To truly hear the voice of the machine, we had to build it again. The high-resolution scans provided a stunning blueprint, a map of a lost continent, but maps are not the territory. The final, definitive proof of how the Antikythera Mechanism worked, and the deepest insights into the minds of its creators, have come from an extraordinary global effort to reconstruct it physically. Teams of dedicated researchers like historian Michael Wright and the International Antikythera Mechanism Research Project have taken those digital blueprints and painstakingly crafted them into working, tangible models. This is not a hobbyist's project, it is a rigorous form of experimental archaeology. By attempting to rebuild the device with the tools and materials available 2,000 years ago, these modern engineers engage in a silent dialogue with the ancient makers. They confront the same practical problems, the stubborn physics of metal against metal, the challenge of translating perfect mathematical ratios into imperfect physical form. Each reconstruction is a hypothesis made solid, a theory tested not on a computer screen, but in the real world of whirring gears and turning dials. When a model based on a specific gear layout successfully predicts an eclipse cycle that matches the inscriptions, that is more than a success, it is a conversation across time. It is the moment a modern mind says, "I understand your logic," and the ancient machine, through its proxy, replies, "You have followed my path." These physical recreations transform the mechanism from a static, corroded artifact in a museum case into a living, breathing demonstration of genius. You can watch the pointers glide across the zodiac, see the moon phase ball rotate, and witness the eclipse marker crawl along its spiral track. This dynamic understanding reveals the device not just as a calculator, but as a performance. The smooth operation, the satisfying click of gears engaging, the visual harmony of the dials, all of these were part of the experience, designed to inspire awe and convey the elegant order of the cosmos. The builders of these models have made a profound discovery. The ancient engineers were not just scientists, they were artists of motion. Every choice, from the thickness of a gear to the layout of the plates, was a balance between mathematical truth and mechanical necessity, a compromise that had to work in the hand as beautifully as it worked in the mind. Yet the investigation into this ancient computer is far from over. Recent expeditions have returned to the original shipwreck site, armed with technology the original divers could never have dreamed of, and they have made astonishing new discoveries. Among the silt and broken pottery, they have recovered additional fragments of the mechanism itself, including a mysterious dual-sided disc and more pieces of finely toothed gears. Each one is a new clue, a fresh sentence in a manuscript we are still learning to read. These new physical pieces immediately fuel scholarly debate. The central mystery now is not whether the machine showed planets, but exactly how. Researchers are passionately debating the precise arrangement of the planetary gear trains on the front dial. The surviving inscriptions name the 5 known planets, and the mechanical logic of the device strongly suggests they were displayed, but the gearing to accomplish this within the known fragments is a breathtakingly complex puzzle. Some propose elegant, compact solutions, while others envision even more elaborate assemblies now lost. This is not just academic nitpicking, it is the search for the machine's true ceiling of genius. Did it only show the sun and moon with eclipse predictions, or was it a full, working orrery of the entire ancient cosmos? Every new gear fragment shifts the possible answer. Meanwhile, advanced imaging techniques continue to perform a kind of digital archaeology on the metal itself, extracting more of the microscopic text from surfaces once thought blank. With each pass, more words emerge from the corrosion, letters that have not been read in 2 millennia. This ongoing textual recovery could reveal entirely new functions, clarify operating instructions, or, in the dream of every researcher, perhaps even uncover a maker's name or a workshop location. Each discovery, whether a physical gear or a newly read word, is a reminder that this is not a closed case. The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is a living narrative, a continuous dialogue across 22 centuries. We ask it questions with our particle accelerators and multi-spectral scanners, and it replies slowly and patiently with the quiet logic of its bronze gears and the faded ink of its Greek script. The final chapter has not been written because with every turn of the crank, both literal and metaphorical, we find there is still more to learn. This single machine forces us to rewrite the entire first chapter of the history of science. For too long, we have celebrated ancient Greece for its philosophy and art, for its elegant theorems and marble statues, while quietly relegating its technology to simple levers and pulleys. The Antikythera Mechanism shatters that comfortable separation. It reveals a civilization where the highest abstract thought was not confined to parchment, but was forged into functional brass. Here was a powerful synergy, a fusion of minds. The mathematical astronomy, the precise cycles of the moon and planets, were a legacy inherited from centuries of Babylonian observation and Egyptian calendrical science. The Greeks did not invent these numbers, but they performed a unique kind of magic with them. They took those numerical patterns, those abstract ratios describing celestial motion, and handed them to the master craftsmen in the workshop. Those engineers then performed a second act of translation, turning numbers into physical form, into interlocking gears where a ratio of 64 to 38 teeth became a perfect model of the moon's changing speed. This was not theory followed by practice, it was a continuous collaborative loop. The philosopher provided the map of the heavens, and the engineer built the clock that kept its time. This seamless integration challenges one of our most deeply held stories about human progress, the so-called scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. That narrative, centered on figures like Galileo and Newton, is often told as a sudden European rebirth of reason after a long medieval sleep. The Antikythera Mechanism proves that many of the conceptual leaps we attribute to that era, the mechanization of the cosmos, the desire to build physical models of natural law, were achieved in antiquity. This does not diminish the achievements of Galileo, but it completely reframes them. It suggests that the history of science is not a single, linear march toward truth led by one culture. Instead, it is a more fragmented, more global story, a tapestry where complex ideas can emerge in one time and place, woven from threads borrowed from many cultures, only to fray and vanish, their patterns later rediscovered or reinvented elsewhere in a different form. The journey of knowledge is not a straight road but a spiral where humanity circles back to profound ideas, sometimes recognizing them, sometimes building upon them, and sometimes, tragically, starting again from scratch. By placing this device on the same pedestal as the Parthenon or the dialogues of Plato, we see a fuller picture of Greek genius. They were not just builders of temples for the gods, but builders of temples for the mind, intricate machines of geared brass that calculated the very motions of those gods. This redefined capability asks a humbling question of our own age. What synergies between thought and craft do we possess today that might one day be forgotten, waiting for a future civilization to uncover and marvel at their silent, sophisticated logic? The chance discovery of the Antikythera Mechanism poses a thrilling and unsettling possibility. If one such device survived, could there be others still waiting to be found? The ship that carried it was not a royal barge or a sacred vessel, but a merchant galley, a floating warehouse of luxury goods destined for the elite of the Roman world. Its cargo included bronze and marble statues, fine glassware, jewelry, and coins. The mechanism was nestled among these items, likely a commissioned treasure for a wealthy patron, a scholar, or perhaps a temple. This context is crucial. It suggests such instruments were not mythical objects of legend, but tangible, tradable commodities. They were products of a workshop, bought and paid for, shipped across the sea like any other valuable. If one was on this ship, why not on others? The Mediterranean of that era was a bustling highway of trade, and shipwrecks are tragically common. The seabed is a vast, cold museum, preserving in silt and darkness what time destroys on land. The real question becomes not if more exist, but where and in what state. Imagine a crate of similar devices packed in straw, resting in the hold of a vessel that never reached its port. Over 2 millennia, the wooden cases and intricate frames would dissolve, leaving behind only a cryptic pile of corroded bronze gears and plates, indistinguishable to an untrained eye from a lump of scrap metal. They may already be sitting in museum storage rooms around the Mediterranean, mislabeled as unidentified metal conglomerates or curious nautical fittings. Their secret awaits only a curious researcher with a modern scanner. This hope actively drives a new generation of underwater archaeologists and historians. They are no longer just searching for amphorae and statues, They are hunting for the subtle signature of advanced engineering, for the telltale geometry of gear teeth hidden within a concretion. Advanced imaging technologies, like the very X-ray tomography that unlocked the first mechanism's secrets, can now be used proactively, scanning unidentified objects in collections or even surveying wreck sites remotely. Each potential lump of metal becomes a promise, a silent question mark. The possibility is profoundly exciting because it reframes the entire narrative. The Antikythera Mechanism might not be a solitary genius, but a surviving member of a lost family. Finding even one more fragment, one more gear train with similar craftsmanship, would transform it from an inexplicable anomaly into a confirmed tradition. It would prove that the workshops were busy, that the knowledge was replicated, that analog computation was a recognized and valued discipline. This search is more than archaeology. It is a quest for lost chapters. We have read a single, breathtaking page from a vast book of ancient technology. The rest of that book may be scattered in fragments across 100 shipwrecks, or buried in the undisturbed resting places of engineers who took their secrets with them. The dark silence of the deep sea and the quiet dust of forgotten tombs may hold the keys to understanding just how widespread this mechanical revolution truly was. The first discovery rewrote history. The next one could fill in the entire missing syllabus. The gears of the Antikythera Mechanism and the silicon chips in your phone are separated by 2,000 years of history, yet they whisper the same human ambition. Both are tools built to answer a timeless question: can we capture the complexity of the world in a system we create and control? The ancient device models the cosmos with interlocking bronze circles, a physical algorithm where each gear's turn is a line of code written in metal. Our modern computers model everything from global weather to financial markets with streams of digital instructions, electrons flowing through microscopic circuits. The materials and the speed are unimaginably different, but the core philosophical impulse is identical. It is the drive to externalize our understanding, to take the intricate patterns we observe in nature or society and build a working simulation outside of our own minds. This is more than a clever comparison. It is a direct lineage of thought. The Hellenistic engineer who calculated the correct ratio of teeth to model the moon's variable orbit was engaged in the same foundational act as a programmer today writing an algorithm to predict traffic patterns. Both are constructing a logical mirror of reality, a set of rules that, when set in motion, generates a forecast. The mechanism's user turned a crank to see a future eclipse, just as a scientist today runs a climate model to see a potential future temperature. One uses mechanical force, the other electrical pulses, but both are tools for extending our cognitive reach, for automating the labor of prediction that our brains alone could never perform at such scale or precision. This reveals something profound about our species. We are not content just to think about the world. We are compelled to build thinking tools that reflect it back to us. From the cosmic calculator resting in a museum case to the supercomputer humming in a research lab, we see a continuous thread, the desire to mechanize understanding, to hold a miniature, operable version of truth in our hands. This journey from bronze gears to silicon chips is not a story of replacement, but of evolution, a testament to an unbroken drive to build machines that can think alongside us, expanding the very boundaries of what it means to know. That forgotten shipwreck has now ignited a passion for discovery in classrooms and workshops around the world. The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is more than a historical mystery. It has become a master key for unlocking a modern love of learning. In a single, corroded artifact, students find a living bridge between subjects that are too often kept separate. It is a history lesson that demands physics to understand, an astronomy puzzle that requires engineering to solve, and an archaeological detective story powered by mathematics. This is not abstract theory, it is the thrilling application of knowledge in action. When a student learns that the moon's variable speed was modeled with a gear ratio of 254 teeth to 19, that number stops being just a figure in a textbook. It becomes a deliberate, brilliant choice made by an ancient mind, a tangible solution to a celestial problem. They see that craftsmanship is not just about making things, but about making things work with breathtaking precision, a skill as vital today in a robotics lab as it was in a bronze workshop 2,000 years ago. This single object teaches a profound lesson in intellectual humility. It forces a confrontation with the uncomfortable truth that vast libraries of human achievement can simply vanish. For a generation raised on the constant accumulation of digital data, this is a startling and necessary idea. It challenges the very notion of linear progress and invites young thinkers to question what other grand chapters of human ingenuity are missing from our story. What assumptions do we hold today that might be completely upended by a discovery tomorrow? Engaging with the mechanism is a hands-on journey through the scientific method itself. Students begin with observation, examining the scans of the fragile fragments. They form hypotheses about what a particular cluster of gears might have calculated. Then they test those ideas not with a thought experiment, but by attempting to build a physical or digital model that actually functions. This process of reconstruction is where ancient ingenuity becomes viscerally relevant. The frustration of aligning gears, the triumph of a dial moving correctly, these experiences connect a modern learner directly to the challenges and breakthroughs of an ancient engineer. It transforms the past from a list of dates and names into a shared human endeavor of problem solving. In this way, the Antikythera Mechanism does more than teach facts, it cultivates a mindset. It shows that the most groundbreaking innovations often happen at the intersections, where astronomy meets metalworking, where philosophy demands a machine. It inspires a new generation to look at the world not as a collection of disconnected subjects, but as a vast, interconnected system waiting to be understood, and perhaps one day to be rebuilt with the tools of their own time. The line between groundbreaking discovery and pure fantasy can sometimes grow dangerously thin. In the decades since its secrets were revealed, the Antikythera Mechanism has attracted a whirlwind of sensational claims, each seeking to amplify its mystery. Some have suggested it was a piece of Atlantean technology, a relic from a fictional super-civilization. Others have proposed it could calculate rocket launch windows or was a navigational device for alien visitors. These ideas, while capturing the public imagination, fundamentally misrepresent the artifact's power. The true wonder of the mechanism lies not in what it impossibly was, but in what it demonstrably is. We must separate the wild speculation from the physical evidence, because only by understanding its grounded reality can we fully appreciate the staggering achievement of its makers. The evidence is etched in metal and preserved by the sea. The gear ratios correspond precisely to the Metonic and Saros cycles, well-documented Babylonian astronomical periods used by Greek scholars. The inscriptions name known planets and constellations, written in the common Greek of the era. Its design and materials are consistent with other high-status Hellenistic bronze work. There is no cryptic code, no anachronistic material, no reference to lost continents. Instead, we find a device deeply embedded in the intellectual currents of its time, a masterful synthesis of existing knowledge from across the Mediterranean. It took the observational data of Babylon, the geometric theories of Greece, and the engineering skill of the Hellenistic workshops, and fused them into a single, revolutionary machine. This grounded origin story is not a reduction of its genius, it is its celebration. The ancient builders did not need alien blueprints, they had something equally powerful, a culture that valued cross-pollination of ideas and the tangible application of reason. To claim an extraterrestrial or mythical source is, in a way, to rob those ancient engineers of their rightful credit. It implies that humans of that era were incapable of such innovation on their own, a notion the mechanism itself spectacularly disproves. The real narrative is one of human intellect at its zenith, of a society that could look at the complex clockwork of the sky and dare to build a smaller, ticking version on Earth. That story, supported by every gear and every character of text, is more compelling than any fiction. It connects us directly to our ancestors not as primitive beings, but as brilliant peers who solved monumental problems with the tools they had. By focusing on the evidence, we honor their achievement for what it truly was, a pinnacle of ancient science and craftsmanship that stands as a timeless testament to what humanity can accomplish when curiosity, knowledge, and skill converge. The machine's survival is a story written not in bronze but in rust. That we can read any of its secrets today is a minor miracle of ancient material science. The engineers who built it made a series of deliberate, brilliant choices that defied the corrosive grasp of 2,000 years under the sea. The gears themselves were not made from pure copper or a brittle alloy, but from a specific formulation known as low tin bronze. This was a Goldilocks material containing just enough tin to make it hard and durable for precise gear teeth, but not so much that it became impossible to work with fine tools. It was a compromise between machinability and longevity, a choice that allowed for intricate cutting while giving the metal a fighting chance against the elements. The frames and casings that held this delicate clockwork were almost certainly crafted from wood, likely a fine-grained boxwood or oak, which provided a beautiful and lightweight housing. This organic material, however, was the mechanism's greatest vulnerability. In the saltwater environment, the wood slowly dissolved, leaving the bronze internals without their protective shell. Yet, in a beautiful paradox, this very loss became a form of preservation. As the wood decayed, it created a corrosive microenvironment around the gears. The bronze itself began to oxidize, forming layers of green and blue copper carbonates and chlorides, the familiar patina of ancient metal. This corrosion expanded, locking the tiny, separate gear wheels into a single, solid mass. What was once a freely moving machine became a fossil, a mineralized lump. This process, while hiding the device's function, also physically cemented its most fragile parts in place. Without that concretion, the individual paper-thin gears would have simply collapsed into a pile of unreadable fragments at the bottom of the sea, scattered by currents and lost forever. The corrosion acted as a crude but effective casting mold, holding the precise spatial relationships between components until modern science could peer inside. Today, scientists study these corrosion products like forensic clues. The specific minerals present tell a story about the exact chemical conditions on the seafloor, the length of immersion, and even the original alloy composition. This knowledge is not just academic, it directly informs how conservators stabilize and preserve the fragments today, using chemical treatments to halt further decay. It also guides the search for similar artifacts, teaching us what signatures to look for in an unidentified lump of seabed concretion. The Antikythera Mechanism, therefore, speaks on two levels. Its gears tell us of celestial cycles, but its very substance tells a parallel tale of earthly chemistry and human foresight. The builders selected materials for a machine meant to last, and in a way they never could have predicted, those materials did their job. The slow violence of the sea that sought to erase it ultimately became the unlikely force that kept its most fragile truths intact. A paradoxical gift from time itself that kept a window to an ancient mind slightly, miraculously, ajar. Its journey from a corroded lump to a global icon is a story in itself. The Antikythera Mechanism has long since sailed out of academic journals and into the heart of popular imagination. You can find its influence in best-selling novels where it unlocks conspiracies, in documentaries narrated with hushed awe, and even woven into the lyrics of progressive rock songs. It has become more than an artifact, it is a symbol. It stands for the brilliant spark of human ingenuity that can flare up in any age, and for the haunting fragility of that same light. It perfectly embodies the tantalizing what if that hangs over all of history. What if this knowledge had not been lost? What if that mechanical tradition had continued unbroken for 2,000 years? The device does not answer these questions, it simply asks them silently and powerfully every time we look at its intricate fragments. This symbolic power makes it a versatile shorthand in storytelling. In a novel or a film, the mere appearance of a complex ancient gearwork device immediately signals to the audience that they are entering a world of forgotten science, of secrets buried by time. It taps directly into our collective sense of wonder and our love for a genuine mystery that is backed by real, physical proof. Unlike the myths of Atlantis or alien visitors, this is a truth that is stranger than any fiction, and that gives its cultural footprint a unique weight. It resonates because it is real. We are not imagining a hypothetical advanced civilization. We are grappling with the fact that our own ancestors, within the recorded timeline of history, achieved a mechanical sophistication that still leaves us breathless. This connection is profoundly human. When a composer writes a symphony inspired by its celestial calculations, or a writer weaves it into a tale of ancient astronomers, they are reaching across the centuries to touch the same awe that the original user must have felt, cranking the handle and watching the cosmos turn. The mechanism bridges that gap. It makes the intellectual ambition of the Hellenistic world feel immediate and tangible, not as dry history, but as a living, ticking artifact of a mind that thought in gears and cycles. By capturing the public's imagination, it ensures its own story is never finished. Each new documentary, each new fictional reference, introduces its mystery to a fresh audience, sparking new questions and inspiring future scientists, historians, and engineers. In this way, the machine continues to do what it was always built to do, to turn the wheels of inquiry, to model not just the motions of the heavens, but the endless, curious motion of the human mind itself, forever drawn to the light of a lost, brilliant flame. This delicate relic now rests in a climate-controlled case, a silent patient surrounded by doctors debating the ethics of its care. Every fragment of the Antikythera Mechanism is a non-renewable resource, a piece of physical history that can never be replaced. This reality creates a profound and constant tension for those entrusted with its study, a balancing act between the urgent desire to know and the solemn duty to preserve. On one side of this scale rests our scientific curiosity, armed with ever more powerful tools. On the other rests the artifact itself, a survivor of shipwreck and centuries of corrosion that has earned its rest. The high-tech scans that revealed its inner workings represent a monumental victory for non-invasive research. X-ray tomography and surface imaging allowed us to see through the corrosion without touching it, to read the text without scraping away a single letter. These methods are the ideal, offering knowledge without cost to the original. Yet they have limits. Some of the most stubborn questions about the alloy's exact composition, the sources of its metals, or the microscopic tools used to cut its gears might only be answered by taking a tiny, physical sample. This is the ethical frontier. Should we remove a minuscule piece, perhaps a speck of corrosion or a sliver of metal from a broken edge, to subject it to the most advanced laboratory analysis? The potential gain is significant. Such a sample could reveal trade routes for tin and copper, or pinpoint the workshop's location through isotopic fingerprints. But the loss, however small, is permanent. It is an irreversible alteration to an object that has remained whole against all odds for 2,000 years. This dilemma is not unique to this mechanism. It is the core challenge of modern archaeology. Each generation of researchers acts as a steward, holding these objects in trust for all future generations. The choices made today under the bright lights of a modern lab will determine what is left for the scientists of the 25th century, who will undoubtedly have tools and questions we cannot yet conceive. The guiding principle becomes one of minimal intervention. Every proposed touch, every new analysis must justify its potential harm against the certainty of its benefit. It forces a humility upon the process. Our desire to extract every last secret must be tempered by the recognition that the object has a right to its own integrity, a story that may not be fully ours to uncover in our lifetime. This respectful caution is itself a form of communication with the past. It says we value this bridge not only for the data it provides, but for its mere continued existence as a touchstone to another age. We are learning not just from its gears, but from our own evolving relationship with it, understanding that sometimes preserving the mystery is part of honoring the marvel. The silent dialogue between ancient bronze and modern silicon is accelerating. The future of understanding the Antikythera mechanism, and perhaps finding others like it, rests in technologies that sound like science fiction. One of the most promising frontiers is a technique called neutron imaging. Unlike X-rays, which are absorbed by dense metals, neutrons can pass through thick layers of corrosion and metal with ease, interacting with the light elements often hidden within. This could reveal deeper, previously invisible internal structures, perhaps even the ghostly imprint of the long-vanished wooden frame on the corroded bronze, or trace residues of ancient lubricants inside the gear housings. It would be like gaining X-ray vision that sees not just bones, but the outlines of long-decayed flesh, offering a three-dimensional map of the entire original assembly. At the same time, artificial intelligence presents another revolutionary tool. Researchers could train AI algorithms on the thousands of known characters from the mechanism's inscriptions, then set them loose to scour every digitized fragment of ancient Greek literature, from astronomical treatises to poetry. The goal would be to find linguistic patterns, repeated phrases, or contextual clues that could automatically suggest the missing text in the mechanism's damaged areas, effectively using the entire corpus of classical writing as a template to reconstruct its specific manual. This is not just filling in blanks, it is building a contextual bridge from a single object to the vast library of thought from which it sprang. Beyond pure research, technology also offers new ways to share this wonder. Advanced three-dimensional printing using high-resolution scan data could produce precise, working replicas not just for museums, but as tactile models for visually impaired learners to feel the gear trains mesh and trace the spiral grooves of the Eclipse dial with their fingers. This transforms an inaccessible visual marvel into a tangible, experiential lesson in ancient genius. Each technological leap reframes our relationship with the past. The mechanism is no longer a static artifact to be passively observed. It has become an active participant in a feedback loop with the 21st century. We ask it new questions with particle beams and machine learning, and it responds by revealing new layers of its constructed logic. This ongoing conversation proves that history is not a closed book on a shelf. It is an open source code constantly being debugged and expanded with every new tool we invent. The final word on the Antikythera mechanism has not been written because our capacity to listen to it is still growing. That final, silent challenge is perhaps its most important gift. The Antikythera mechanism is not merely a relic to be decoded, but a mirror held up to our own understanding of time and human achievement. It asks us to reconsider the very shape of history. We often chart the past as a steady, upward climb from simple to complex, a narrative that flatters our modern sense of superiority. This machine, with its intricate gears and celestial calculations, stands as a quiet refutation of that comforting story. It proves that peaks of technological and intellectual sophistication can rise, shine with astonishing light, and then be swallowed by a long cultural night. The straight line is an illusion. History is a landscape of mountains and valleys, and we have only just begun to map its true terrain. This realization is a profound lesson in humility. It whispers across the centuries that the minds of our ancestors were not primitive precursors to our own, but were fully formed, brilliantly creative engines capable of conceiving and constructing machines of sublime complexity. They faced the same cosmos we do with the same burning curiosity, and they built a working model of it from bronze and ingenuity. When we look at its fragments, we are not looking down through time at a simpler people. We are looking across a gulf at intellectual peers who chose a different material to express their genius. The loss of their knowledge, the silence that followed their workshop's closure, is a stark reminder of how fragile the thread of discovery truly is. Progress is not automatic. It is a choice made again and again by societies that value inquiry, support craftsmanship, and protect the means of passing knowledge from one generation to the next. That thread was broken, and an entire discipline of analog computation faded into legend, waiting for a storm to toss a single, miraculous example onto a 20th century shore. This changes how we must look forward as much as how we look back. As we point our silicon telescopes toward distant galaxies and send digital probes to the edge of our solar system, we should also glance over our shoulder with a renewed and deep respect. Our journey to understand the universe did not begin with a vacuum tube or a microchip. It began with philosophers observing the stars and engineers translating those observations into the quiet, turning logic of interlocking gears. The bronze computer and the silicon computer are chapters in the same endless story, the human urge to build a thinking tool that reflects the world back to us. So the era of ancient analog computers may be lost, but its greatest discovery now lives within us, rekindling a sense of wonder that is both old and new. It challenges us to keep searching the shadows of history, for who knows what other masterpieces of forgotten genius lie hidden, waiting to be found. It urges us to preserve and share our own knowledge with care, lest our greatest achievements suffer the same fate of silence. And above all, it invites us to never stop marveling at the endless, creative spirit that can look at the starry sky and, against all odds, build a little piece of it here on Earth.